You have found us, me, the podcast, and my fab guests who are everyday people. And together, here, we explore that's life. Or is it?
Cha-ching! And here we are once more. I'm very, very excited for this session, this recording with John Pugh and Paul McGee. And I'm going to just hand over to you both of you gentlemen, just to give a 60-second, and I mean, John, 60 seconds, introduction as to who you are. John, over to you.
I'm not quite sure I know who I am. I'm morph according to the week. But my professional background was in business. I last left as a CEO of a public company, but it was actually based in Oman. Origins as an accountant, sort of moving through the proverbial glass ceiling into general management, and since that time I've become maybe the reluctant mentor with the government's Help to Grow program, where I encountered Kerry as the ambassador of the ABM, paying it
Amazing.
forward by paying it back.
You have such a wonderful, eclectic career and experiences, which we're going to delve into in just a little bit, but I'm really keen to get Paul to introduce himself.
Right, Kerry. Well, I'm a husband of one. I'm a father of two, and I'm a supporter of many football teams, but particularly Wigan Athletic. But there is something that says you can change whoever you're married to, you can change religion, you can't change your football team. I'm the exception that proves the rule. I've got about half a dozen teams I keep my eyes on. And I'm a speaker, I'm an author and coach. I've written 13 books, and one of them actually became a Sunday Times bestseller. So, and I love life, and I'm a huge fan of nature particularly. And I've become a bit of a tree hugger in my old age. So that's me.
Wonderful. Well, you both have so much energy, which I'm assuming is the backbone of your friendship. So can you just explain how you know one another? Because you've very different walks of life. Paul, how did you meet John?
Well, I mean, I could say I was his probation officer.
Because you were actually a probation officer, weren't you?
I was actually a probation officer. John's been a great client. He's turned his life around. But actually, we met through church, and we met at a time when I was ill with ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome. And I have many memories of John and his energy and vitality and his zest for life. But there's still something that I've never, ever forgotten, that when I was ill with ME, unfortunately, a lot of the medical profession didn't believe it was a genuine illness. And so I was sent to see a psychiatrist in Liverpool. And when you're ill and your wife's working full time, getting to Liverpool to see this psychiatrist wasn't a straightforward experience. And bless him, John drove me to that appointment and to a couple of others, went out of his way. And so despite the fact that we've known each other for 36 years, it was probably something he did in his first year of knowing me that still stands with me.
Wow.
He still owes me for the bus fare, by the way, Kerry.
So did you meet in church?
Yes, we did. We were the two quiet ones at the back who were a little bit shy and introvert. And then and John is a great sort of theatrical person as well. And although I was ill with ME, he still got me involved a little bit in the production of a play that he put on, which kind of went free into the community, and we put food on for people and gave them this wonderful sort of production that John, I think, wrote and directed. And it was a real sort of blessing to the community. And I was glad to play a small part in that.
John, I can't for 1 second believe that you were one of the quiet ones in the back. This doesn't equate to me.
You might have slightly exaggerated that, Kerry.
Well, of course, we also ought to add, Paul, that it wasn't actually a church per se. It was a church of people. but it was actually in the Odeon Cinema, if you recall, in Warrington. And that was essentially the gathering of the group of believers at that time. But no, yeah, I was there as you would expect, the ultimate agent provocateur, insofar as that if I can't see it, feel it, touch it, smell it, taste it, or kick it, it probably doesn't exist. And I think Paul as a character was clearly a very genuine individual, and ME was considered the yuppie disease. So it was a bit of a confusion for me that I'd met somebody that was sincere of character, but apparently had this, what my grandmother would have referred to as lazy-itis.
I remember it. That whole the syndrome coming out, and I think I did actually know a couple of people with it too. So I can't empathise obviously because I didn't have it, but I can sympathise with the symptoms, Paul. But I just want to stick with the church theme at the moment, because I'm extremely thankful for believers, because my youngest son, who is an MMA fighter, he has recently become very spiritual. He's found God, and the belief has helped him turn his life around.
Right.
And so, I just wanted to mention that, because it's a very strong theme with you both, and I love that that's where you met and connected and have this wonderful friendship. So so Paul, just going back to the ME topic, because I can't believe that I can't remember there ever being a cure. So how did you manage to navigate through that?
Well, there still isn't, and it affects people in different ways. I mean, I actually lost my job through ill health because of it, and John was very kind. He went, "I've got a cyanide pill if you want to just shorten this experience." But he's always been one to look on the bright side in terms of our friendship. But no, there isn't a cure. And I'd love to say, if we're talking about a Christian theme, clearly people prayed for me. But I think it wouldn't be appropriate or truthful to say I was miraculously healed. It was just a question of, I did over time, I would improve, then I would relapse, improve and relapse. But those relapses became less severe. I mean, at one stage, as a 24-year-old, I had a walking stick, and the only person I knew with the illness was in a wheelchair. But eventually, I did start to see those relapses become, not as bad. I didn't need a walking stick. But the reason why I went self-employed was because I couldn't pass a medical. I couldn't get a job doing anything. So the only option I did have was to employ myself, and I did very well at the interview and passed my own medical.
I love it. So just before we continue on that, because I'm really keen to delve into SUMO, I just wanted to pick up on John's wonderful theme of dancing. So in my mind, John, you dance through life. How true is that?
Yeah, no, it really is. It's the proverbial pivot point for all of us. In the glass is half full and half empty, and it very much fits with Paul's persona, is profiling, in the sense of the SUMO, the shut up, move on. I struggle to call Paul a motivational speaker. What he actually philosophizes ultimately is such a positive vibe, but it's a reality check whereby he actually says, your life will be challenged, and it's really the responses to that challenge that makes you what you are. So in that sense of the being positive, I would be on the football field quite clearly getting beaten soundly, 2-0 down with 10 minutes to go, but I would refuse to stop running because I genuinely believed it was plausible to actually win 3-2. And it's a case of how you react to challenge. I think Paul has a very clever and very simple equation that expresses that. I was thinking Paul, come in on me on that one, on your...
It's the E plus R equals O. It's the event plus our response that influences the outcome. And I think some people live life as if it's E equals O. If that's the event, if that's the challenge, if that's the setback, if that's the disappointment, then you know what the outcome's going to be. And I'm a great believer, and I know obviously with you, Kerry, that we are in the equation and we do need to take responsibility for our choices. And I mentioned SUMO, which is an acronym, can stand for shut up, move on, or in slightly other more delicate circumstances, it can stand for stop, understand, move on. But interestingly enough, as a word, SUMO is a word, not as an acronym. In Latin, means choose. And our choices count, and our choices matter, and our choices compound. So it's about helping people to respond better to some of life's challenges that happen.
Yeah. And
give them some insights and ideas.
And in that philosophy around the dance thing is that I have that on my profile image of two, shall we call them, gentlemen, lady and gentleman of a certain age dancing. And the point is that essentially we do not stop dancing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop dancing.
Yes, I love that.
And that is so true.
And so, Paul, just going back to the SUMO, I much prefer the version "shut up and move on."
The majority of people do, but I've done literally work around the world, and there are some organisations who are say a little bit more delicate and sensitive. I don't think it's ever been an issue for John, that's for sure. We love your ideas, but we just, we feel people might be offended by the shut up bit. And in many ways, the shut up bit isn't meant to tell them, shout at them and say, shut up. But it is about, shh, take time out, press pause, stop, think, reflect, and consider, how life is, your perspective on things and how you're responding. We do a lot of stuff in life on autopilot, from driving a car. I was driving down to Stratford-upon-Avon last week for an event. And, you're kind of lost in your thoughts and your music. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but it's like all of a sudden you think, what happened to the last 10 miles? Why am I in the back seat? And it's that thought of, we do a lot of stuff on autopilot, like driving, like getting dressed in the morning, which explains sometimes what John wears. He just got himself dressed on autopilot without thinking, and it shows. But part of what I want to do is challenge people. Sorry, John. Hopefully, the next show you're interviewing a self-esteem counsellor. I've got them a patient if they need it. But it is about stop, shut up, press pause, think, reflect. And John, joking aside, is a brilliant guy at realising we've got one shot at this life. So let's maximise not just the opportunity, but you could almost use the word the privilege that we do all have to be fortunate enough to live on this planet at this time.
Kerry, I can bring in a very real example that fits. It dovetails into Paul's reference to driving to Stratford. And the occasion of the positivity is based on the fact that I was on a hot date, taking my hot date to see Romeo and Juliet in Stratford, and my blessed car broke down. I couldn't get it going. And I thought, this is a double disaster. Not only do I not get to share this with the date, but I don't even get to go to Stratford and see the play. So what did I do? I did not wallow. I quickly got a sign out of bits of paper, and I can't remember the implements, but I wrote a sign by the edge of the motorway, and I just wrote Stratford, to be or not to be. And I got picked up like instantly, and it caused people to laugh and understand why I was standing there with this, clearly face value stupid sign. But it got me to Stratford. It got me with my date to Stratford, and I got to see the play.
Wow,
so
I love that.
It's a true story. I did not make that up. But it is that drives the attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. What happened to the hot date?
I can't tell you.
Okay.
No, I
Move
married
on.
her.
I was just intrigued, just
Yeah.
curious.
She wasn't sure whether she should be called Lady Macbeth.
In reality, the truth is, my romantic notion was dashed when the said date, thinking this has to be the pinnacle of romanticism with Romeo and Juliet. She promptly fell asleep.
Oh. Oh, that's a great story. Thank you. So going back to sumo, Paul, what was it that were you? I'm just really keen to find out what the catalyst was for you to come up with this. Were you listening to someone who you just wanted to say, just shut up and move on? What
Look,
was
enough
it?
about my relationship with John. What I would say, Kerry, is in the 90s then, I was doing some training. I was working with people who'd been made redundant from British Coal. Then I started to do some workshops at some companies. And I was gathering my own little, you could call it toolkit of ideas. And then I was presenting in 2002 a workshop in Scotland, coaching and counselling skills. There was actually a delegate who actually said, well, if all else fails, you can all tell them to sumo. Pause. I'm like, sumo, what do you mean? Shut up, move on. And it was just like, all right, nice little phrase. A week later, I'm doing the same course, and I happened to weave in that story. Oh, someone last week said, sumo, shut up, move on. And then it started to create a bit of a life of its own. And so metaphorically, I feel like someone gave me a seed of an idea, which was a catchphrase. But then ultimately, it evolved into being an umbrella term to describe a toolkit of ideas. And I started to do more and more of these, what I might call my sumo talks, and to have things like E plus R equals O, event, response, outcome, and various other ideas, develop some fruity thinking, and learn Latin, carpe diem, seize the day. And then people just used to say, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book. Now, I was rejected by 13 publishers, but then one publisher took a risk on me, and W.H. Smith's, rather fortuitously, decided to make it their business book of the month when it came out in 2005. And it's fortuitous that they chose it. It's even more fortuitous because it's not even a business book. It's more of a personal development book. But it did really well. It opened various doors, and nearly 21 years later, it sold 250,000 copies. And it's now, having been rejected by 13 publishers, it's now been translated into 13 different languages, the most recent being Ukrainian.
Wow, that's truly an amazing story. So it just goes to show persistence does pay off, doesn't it, Paul?
It does, but it's also, I'd call it smart persistence, because there are people who are very persistent, but they're a bit delusional. And so you do need to get feedback from people who want the best for you, but are prepared to challenge you. Because some people will just persist, they get nowhere. There is also the courage to know when it's right to quit. And having someone like John maybe as a mentor in your life, the thing about John is he's allergic to fences. And what I mean by that is he's never sat on one in his life. and therefore, you always know where you stand with him. Now, I knew John, but I knew that if John said, this is a crazy idea, no wonder these publishers are rejecting it. Who's going to read a book called Sumo, Shut Up, Move On? If he'd have felt that, he would have said it. And you do need in life, I believe, you do need your challengers as well as your cheerleaders. And I think John can be both.
Yeah, I am not somebody that dances around the handbag. I don't know, Kerry, whether that resonates with you. Do you understand what that principle, where it actually comes from? Because
yes, I think so. Isn't it from being on the? Well, tell us, John.
Yeah, no. Essentially, you were one of the boys at the edge of the dance floor, plucking up the courage to go and ask the girls to dance, and they would invariably be dancing in a circle with their backs to you, their handbag on the floor, you would find the courage to walk across the dance floor. And if the young lady in question was not sure, she would dance with you, but keep the handbag actually between the two of you so you couldn't get any closer. And then,
is that right?
Yes. And then at the point, she delicately, with her, feet and deftly moved the handbag out of the way. We had therefore reached the point where we were no longer dancing around the handbag and business was underway.
Oh my God. I've never heard that. Is that
Gary, well, there's a reason, because that's how you used to pick up someone in a relationship in the 1920s when John was first courting. That's how they used to do it. None of this swipe right or left. But yeah, the 1920s, when John was probably still only in his mid-teens, he was going for it.
And it took enormous courage, because the walk back from that circle of young ladies dancing, based on the rejection, it was the longest walk in your life, as you were rejoining all of your mates who were just howling with laughter. So it took a lot of courage to reach out to the young ladies. But I'd also pick up on a dinner I attended last week, which was footballing legends. And it comes back to what Paul was saying a minute ago about rejection and being positive and handling rejection. It was billed as England legends, and they were legends. There was Chris Waddle, Pearce, there was Des Walker, and there was Mark Wright. And I won't say anything more other than the fact that as each of them were explaining their success in football, they actually revealed, which I wasn't aware of this, all of them were rejected several times by several football clubs before they became successful, even to the point that Stuart Pearce, he actually qualified as an electrician through an apprenticeship and didn't start playing professional football until he was 21 because he'd been rejected by so many clubs. But none of these characters who became legends ever actually walked away from it and decided that it was failure. They weren't having it. They stayed with it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a big believer in persistence, but I like what you said, Paul. It's smart persistence, and that's the key thing. So John, you have a thing of having dinner with famous footballers.
Yes, I was in the beginning days of Dubai as an entity. It was in the 1980s. For those of you who are got enough knowledge and memory of football at that time, Don Revie walked out of the England job and went to manage a local club in Dubai called Al Nassr, and he was very close friends with Bobby Moore, who was trying to establish Bobby Moore schools of football. And in the local sort of expat league, which was pretty competitive, we were invited to assist Bobby Moore and his wider entourage in establishing the Bobby Moore School in Dubai, which we did. And Bobby Moore brought with him Gordon Banks, the England goalkeeper, George Best, the Irish international. We all know George Best, and another professional who, sadly, I can't remember his name, but he was a Scottish guy from Arts. Anyway, the point was, the promise was for giving 3 weeks of commitment to help and provide support, is we got to play in a competitive match with the England or with the internationals against the UAE national side. The sponsors hijacked the shirts, and Bobby Moore came off the pitch after about 15 minutes, and everybody was a bit concerned about this, that he was injured or something had upset him, and he said, no. It was my understanding that these lads were going to play alongside us. He said, yes, but we need the spot. He said, no. He said, I don't wish to be funny. He said, but, we're giving our word. And if they don't go out, I don't go out. And he didn't have to do that because he was never going to see us again. But as a follow-on to that, in the changing room, he said, lads, we're going out for dinner. So I was there in the changing room with George Best, Gordon Banks, Bobby Moore, and the Scottish professional. And they said, you've welcome to join us for dinner, guys. We're going to meet an old friend. And we all, as you imagine, we just didn't need to be asked twice. We went off to the Hyatt Regency, the restaurant at the top, which was a revolving restaurant. Bobby Moore excused himself, went to get his friend, and came back in. And we all found ourselves at dinner with Bobby Moore, Gordon Banks, George Best, and none other than we had dinner with Pele.
Oh, and was he? So I have this image of Pele as being an extremely down to earth
Yes.
and warm guy. Is that the case?
Yes.
Yeah,
He was
lovely.
the bond between Bobby Moore and Pele had been established in, I think it was the 1970, or maybe it was the World Cup in Mexico, Paul.
Yeah, it was 1970.
Yeah. And the reason he was there is he was literally en route to Australia because he was a FIFA ambassador. So that's why he was there.
Right. So, as usual, this wonderful discussion has just gobbled up the time, and so we have to think about wrapping up very sadly. But before we do, I just wanted to ask John. One of the things that has stood out for me about you, John, is the fact that you are Father Christmas.
What a privilege it was indeed.
Just tell us in the 30 seconds, what does that do for you, and what does it do for the children that you're Father Christmas for?
There is nobody in the room at that moment other than that child, and you are the depiction of Father Christmas. You are completely real. You exist. You are a reality check, and they believe. And if you can instill that belief within a young child, my fondest memory of that was the little feral lad from Liverpool who was basically challenging me to say, "You's not Santa," and I'm going, "No, that's quite correct. Santa is somebody that was invented by Coca-Cola. I'm actually Father Christmas, and if you're not asleep on Christmas Eve, I can't fulfill my contract, and I cannot leave my presents that I have for you." To which he replied in his vernacular Liverpudlian, "Alright, we get no presses." And I'm going, "No, that's the deal." So, on balance, boys, do you really want to take that risk? And they were streetwise enough that as they reached the gate or the door they were going through to say goodbye, they both ran back at me and they hugged me and they said, "You really are Father Christmas, aren't you?" And that is my lasting. And in fact, I'd almost forgotten. But many moons before that, I was an emergency replacement Father Christmas at my grandson's infant school. I climbed through the window because they were expecting me to come through the door, and I had my grandson actually sitting on my lap, and I was reading The Night Before Christmas to him. And to this day, Marley has no idea that it was his grandfather depicting that very special gentleman.
Oh, what a memory. That's fantastic. So we have to wrap up. I'm really sorry, but we've had lots of wonderful life messages to our listeners, but considering the theme of the podcast is that's life, or is it? Do we have a final message?
I think for me, Kerry, I'm trying to be succinct for once, but there's 3 points I'd like to make. One, to make the most of life, number one, you need to show up. Life is not to be lived on the sidelines. It's a participation sport, I believe. And I tend to say to people, volunteer, get involved, make your voice heard, because ultimately when you show up, stuff shows up. So that's the first thing. Secondly, have an attitude of service. A wise teacher from 2,000 years ago is quoted as saying it's more blessed to give than to receive. And neuroscience now shows that when you show kindness to other people, when you're giving to others, it releases serotonin and oxytocin into your brain. It makes you feel good. And I think just an attitude of how can I serve here is just a brilliant approach. And then finally, shine. The world is not served well by us playing small. We all have a talent, we all have a gift, we all have an outlook on life, an idea, an insight, and we're all unique. So it's not about being the centre of attention and always in the spotlight necessarily, but in our own unique way, make sure you shine, not for your benefit, but for the benefit of others. So show up, serve, shine. And that was from SUMO.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And John, I'm going to do yours for you. Yours has got to be keep sparkling and dancing and dance through life and don't stop.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Will you get Paul also to rewrite his how to handle, not strangle difficult people? I want the one that says how to strangle difficult people and get away with it.
There you go, Paul.
We come back to the theme of why I was once John's probation officer.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. And I hope our paths cross again very soon. Take care.
Pleasure. Thanks, Kerry.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of That's Life, or Is It? I'm Kerry Dorman, author of The Life Stories of Jenny Lee, and the first one, published in 2025, is available through local bookshops and Waterstones, or indeed Barnes & Noble. If you have a life story to explore with me, please get in touch via the website jennylee.co.uk.
Cha-ching!